Welcome to the Film Florida podcast. I'm John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Before we get to our interview, if you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. Please also consider going to our website and donating $20.25 for our 2025 fundraising campaign. Visit the Film Florida merchandise page at filmflorida.creator-spring.com to purchase Film Florida t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, and more. All merchandise proceeds go to the Film Florida Filmmaker Grant and Scholarship Fund. Shawn Davis has been the executive producer of the Film Independent Spirit Awards for 22 years. The Film Independent Spirit Awards is the premier awards event for the independent film and television community. Shawn is also a two-time Emmy-nominated producer for his work on the Spirit Awards. We talked to Shawn about the Film Independent Spirit Awards, the importance of the independent film community, his personal ties to Florida, and more on this episode of the Film Florida podcast. Here's my conversation with Shawn Davis. Welcome to the Film Florida podcast, Shawn.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you, John.
So let's kind of start at the beginning. How did you get your start in the industry? Take us up to your current role.
Oh, wow. My career in Los Angeles started in 1996. Prior to that, I lived in Central Florida, Polk County, and I was working towards a psych degree and had the opportunity to come out to Los Angeles a couple of years before that and just fell in love with the city. And so I thought I'd come out here. And originally, I was coming to work in front of the camera because I thought I could. And I did that. I tried that for about a year and then realized I was not as good as I thought I was. And during that time, I had met a few friends who were still great friends of mine now, who were just graduating from LMU and starting their careers in film. And one specifically, my friend Effie Brown, was starting working on this short film. And I went up to her and said, I know nothing about film production. I'd love to learn. And she was like, you have a pickup truck and you live in Los Angeles, come work for me. And that literally started my career. That was back in I'm probably aging myself now, but that was back when we still had Yellow Pages. And she's like, go through here and get as much free stuff as you can. So that's sort of what started me on the film production side, because I was in film for many years before I started in event production. And she carried me through and just really taught me. I have no formal training in film, no college degree in film, but the hands-on experience was amazing for me. And I didn't say no to anything. I think that was in the beginning. If people
Mhm.
asked me to do something, I just did it. And I went from being mostly like an unpaid intern to a PA, where I think as a production assistant in this industry is where you really get the experience,
Right.
because you were thrown onto a grip truck, you're in a lighting truck, you're everywhere. So I really learned all the different departments and what they were doing, of how they sort of came to be and how they worked with it in the film industry. From that, I started as an APOC, a POC, a production manager. So I hit every single level there was coming into the film production. And it was the best experience and training I could get. And I did that from 95 until 2000, and I think 2005, or 96 to 2005, I think was the last time I worked on a movie. When I met Film Independent, it was after I finished a film in New Orleans, and I came back and there was a strike, so there wasn't a lot of work. And Film Independent had just purchased the LA Film Festival.
Okay.
And again, it's who you know. The producer on the film that I worked on in New Orleans was on the board at Film Independent, which at the time was IFP West. And so she said, you need to go meet these people. So it was literally these introductions of the people you know. And I came in and they asked me if I knew what I was doing, and I lied and said yes, because you needed a job back then. And I joke around that this is my longest seasonal job since 2002. I've been here since 2002. So it was the best move I made from film into event production, and especially focusing on the LA Film Festival. That's where I started with Film Independent.
Mhm.
And then the Spirit Awards kind of came involved. So I was on this track of like, I would work on the Spirit Awards, I'd go do a movie. I'd work on the film festival, I'd go do a movie. And then Film Independent hired me full time in 2004.
So we obviously are talking about the Film Independent Spirit Awards, but more importantly, you're out in LA and, as we're talking, everybody out there is dealing with the fire issue. So tell us a little bit about kind of give us at this moment in time, kind of the current update and how it is, involved in your planning now for the next couple of weeks leading it up to the awards.
Yeah, well, first, it's pretty devastating to be here and see what's happening in the city. We're used to fires around Los Angeles.
Hmm.
I almost 30 years here that I've never seen anything like this. So we're dealing with it. We're moving forward. I think last week obviously was the shock. And I've personally had friends who have lost everything. So we're sort of focusing on that. And I lead my team with, priority is your mental and physical health. And
Hmm.
when that's not working, nothing else does. So as that pertains to the Spirit Awards right now, we're still on target to have the show in February. Our show also takes place next to the Santa Monica Pier, so if you've seen images of the Santa Monica Pier, there's this huge parking lot right next door, and that's where I built the show, so, just a few miles from where everything is happening right now.
And, talking about the award show itself, for those that may not be familiar with Film Independent and the Independent Spirit Awards, tell us about the mission and the goals of each.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Film Independent, let me start with we are a nonprofit organization. We are also a member-based organization. So becoming a member gives you all kind of opportunities. Number one, streaming, getting all the links to all the nominated films and voting. So the members vote for who wins the Spirit Awards. As far as Film Independent, we have a mission to champion creative independence and visual storytelling. We foster a culture of inclusion as well. We support a global community of artists and audiences who embody diversity, innovation, and curiosity and the uniqueness of vision. All that meaning is we just take a step out and we look at and we support creators. We support writers, producers, directors. Film Independent has really come a long way in the 20 plus years I've worked here, but specifically in the past 10 years, not only with our artist development programs, our Film Independent Presents, which is our program and events team, also ran by fellow Floridian Rachel Bleemer, who's
Hmm.
from the Miami Film Festival.
Okay.
We got a lot of Florida representative up here.
Good, good.
And GMM, our Global Media Makers program, which is our international program, which brings in filmmakers from all over the world several times a year to stay here in Los Angeles. And it's a beautiful mentorship program. So that's Film Independent in a nutshell. The Spirit Awards, it's sort of a culmination of everything we do year round at Film Independent. So going back to our artist development programs, our FI Presents, which is our program and events, our year round programming, we get to see a lot of these films either from our artist development program, which is our PI Project Involved, which is our diversity program here at Film Independent, where they make short films. They get partnered with mentors throughout the film industry. Um, we see a lot of these projects and we follow as we track them when they become fellows. We track them and their careers, and we can see a lot of what they're doing, within the film and television. I should say that too. The Spirit Awards also started honoring first run television series back in 2021.
Okay.
So he moved into that as well. So we were primarily film, but then we started seeing how a lot of the actors, but even how the writers, producers, and directors started working in this medium. And I believe that's because we started seeing how television evolved and how scripts evolved. So we were happy to start honoring television back in 2021. But again, their first run. So if they're in their second season or third, they're not eligible currently.
So, Sean, from your perspective, why is the independent film and television industry so important to the overall industry that we work in?
I think part of it is the independent film industry is important because it allows for, I don't know, sort of a greater artistic freedom. When you're not locked into the studio system necessarily, and a lot of independent films obviously aren't. There's a lot more freedom for writers, directors, and actors by giving a voice to underrepresented communities as well. I don't know, it's just not driven by the commercial system, right? The commercial film system. So I think this part we started seeing scripts, right? We started seeing talent really want to be involved in independent film, and I think that's where you could start. We started noticing because it's always for film independence, always been about the Independent Spirit Awards, right? The independent spirit. We started seeing, the larger award shows, the Oscars, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. We started seeing independent film really sneak into
Hmm.
that. And so then you see, when there was 5 categories, now the Oscars have 10 categories, so they can start including all the bigger budgets. So we started seeing that. We started seeing all the talent going and leaning towards independent film. So I think it just, as far as artistically, it just gives everyone a little bit more a bit more ability to write and to be creative in those elements.
Well, and to that respect, what makes the Independent Spirit Awards essential to be part of that independent film community?
I think we are still one of the largest voices out there for independent film. And I know that, like I said, I know there are other shows or other areas and nonprofits that support this, but this has been our part of our core belief. And we're going on 40. This is our 40th anniversary of the Spirit Awards,
Wow.
but the organization in and of itself has been around for about 42 years. And the core from that was all about honoring independent film and bringing it to the forefront. And diversity was in a part of our initiative back in 1985 and continues to be.
Now, walk us through the process of executive producing the Independent Spirit Awards. What's the presentation time like? How do you optimize venues that others might not see as challenging? Give us a little behind the scenes of the months leading up to the award show.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I'm also planning the 2026 show right now as I'm still producing the 2025 show.
Wow.
That's
Okay.
that gives you a little bit of the idea. You're always, you know, in LA award season, obviously it can be very crowded. So you need to get ahead of this and it's also having partnerships with all these other award shows and having real conversations with them. But technically, the Spirit Awards is broken into 2 categories, the way I work, the way I've been producing this. There's the broadcast element, which, is everything on the stage and our presenters and what that feel and look is, and then there's the event side of this, and I produce both, but as we get closer, I bring in a team that helps me with the broadcast elements. I bring in a director, I bring in another EP who sort of has his eye on that, and then I oversee a team of event staff who really oversee everything. And again, this is when you talk about venues, I've always said like this is probably the hardest to venue and most expensive venue to work in Los Angeles. We take a parking lot in Santa Monica and I build a 33,000 square foot tent that all this takes place in. So we build it from the ground up,
Mhm.
and everything we do takes precision. And even though we're in a parking lot, it is measured out, to the foot.
Mhm.
Because if I move things too far, it impedes on a design that a sponsor might be providing, and that's part of the event side of this. We are a 1,200 plus seated luncheon, so we open up at 11 a.m. on a Saturday. We're serving you mimosas when after you get off the carpet. You're coming in, and we have these wonderful sponsors who are building these beautiful, activations for all the attendees to experience. So from 11 o'clock until 2 o'clock is we call it the happy hours because 'cause you're out there for a couple of hours before the show starts. By the time I finish building that space, we're taking over about 65,000 square feet of a parking lot.
Wow.
It takes me about a week to get it all in from the time we stake in the first tent, and then I have about 48 hours to get it all out. So it's a lot harder going out than it is coming in.
Uh-huh.
One thing I always call it the uninvited guest that shows up every year is the weather.
Sure.
And, being in a parking lot in February creates its challenges, but in the 20 well, this is 22 or 23 years I've been doing this now, it's only ever rained on show day 1 time, and
Mhm.
it wasn't bad, and that was when Rainn Wilson was our host
Nice.
back in 2008. But otherwise, we deal with the weather leading up to it. Last year, we had hail coming in, we had wind, and wind is actually the worst thing you can deal with down
Right.
there.
Yeah.
But on show day, they say, God must love independent film because on show day, it's beautiful and everyone has a great time. They go home. I wake up at 6 o'clock the next morning to strike and it's stormy again. So
Yeah.
it lead this way. But all that to be said is probably we start talking about the show as soon as the last show was over. August is really when I start getting involved and talking to vendors and talking to our city officials, and that's when the creative starts, and that's when we start looking at a host,
Mhm.
and no one the one thing about a host, and sometimes they wanna hold a beat, right? So, sometimes that takes a little longer, but starting in August is when we start talking really to all of our vendors and venues and other award shows and partners we know just to make sure we're all playing nice in the sandbox.
That's quite a cycle.
It
Now,
is.
and you are an Emmy-nominated producer for your work on the Spirit Awards. What was that recognition like?
Yeah, that was fun. I have to say it was unexpected, and it was really nice to be on the other side of this. Um, the first time we were nominated, we got to go in person, so it was nice to sort of walk a carpet, be interviewed, which is again what I set up for our show. It was just nice to be with a lot of people that worked so hard. Again, when you build a venue, you're working with people, 12 to 16 hours a day. It's not like
Mhm,
moving into an already established building where,
mhm.
the simplest thing like HVAC and power is there, right? So my team really works hard to make all this come to fruition. So it was nice to sit back and, toast with them and have a moment.
Do you nitpick when you're on the other side?
I did a little bit. But, it's also I know what it takes, I
Yeah,
know exactly what it takes to do what they do, and they do it well.
yeah,
Everyone does it really well, and everyone has sometimes award shows are like award, 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 right?
yeah,
And, it's those moments in between that really count. It's the moments in between that keep everyone participating, right?
right.
So you need those creative moments, and they may not be big, but they're just enough to keep everyone involved. And so I respect everyone out there that does this job.
Yeah. Now, I just going back a second, you mentioned the fact that you guys do this in a parking lot in Santa
Yeah,
Monica under a big tent.
yeah,
Why? I mean, why don't have you ever looked at like, saying this is too much. We're going to go to a permanent venue and find a big ballroom. I mean, why?
yeah.
I'm sure the discussion has come up.
Every year, especially sort of being boots on the ground, I'm out there at 4 AM parking trailers. I've
Hmm.
literally watched this go from a parking lot to an event site, and I returned the keys to the city of Santa Monica a week later. So we have, part of me, especially when the weather comes to play, I was like, I don't have to deal with this if I was just
Hmm.
in a building, right? If I had a place that could hold us. The show, I believe, moved to Santa Monica back in '95. And I don't know what caused it at that point. I think it grew because it was started in a parking lot. Then we were at the Roosevelt Hotel. This was all pre me working at Film Independent. It was at the Roosevelt Hotel, which was the birthplace of the Oscars.
Sure.
It had gone to different hotels and restaurants until I think it got too big, and the only thing that could really do that, and to also make it special, was to put this in a tent. It was a much smaller event even when I started in 2002.
Hmm.
And then it's just gotten bigger, and I think part of that is because the films have gotten better. The industry became more interested in what we did.
Hmm.
So it started becoming kind of part of our DNA. We did move in 2010. I think that was our 25th anniversary to downtown Los Angeles, and part of that deal was we were moving the LA Film Festival down there, so we
Okay.
wanted to see if everything could work, and our show is always either on a Saturday or Sunday. It's always, sort of a brunch. Let's think that, this 11, 12, 1 o'clock show, and we moved it to an evening down at downtown, and our view was the 110 freeway and at night, and it just took on a different feeling. And after that, they're like, take it back to the beach. So ever since, we've been back to the beach, and we've kind of ping ponged. We were in one parking lot for a little while, and then I believe it was about 8 years ago we moved to where we are now.
Yeah. Very
It
interesting.
just makes it special, when especially because of the reception part of it before we actually start the live show. You're just hanging out in the Pacific Ocean as your backyard, and so
Yeah.
it lends its sort of identity to who we are as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, talking about the nominating committee for the show, you guys operate with four
guidelines I read in making selections. Talk about the guidelines that the committee uses and talk about how they kind of shape the culture of the awards.
This is the one part that I actually don't have a lot to deal with. I can talk a little bit about this, but this is sort of that separation of church and state in a
Yep.
little bit. And from an executive producer side of the show, I've stayed out of, and I don't think this position has ever been involved in the actual nominating process. So I work with this extremely talented filmmaker, Drea Clark, who is our nominations producer, and she runs and puts together the several committees that oversee all the nominations. So we have a total of 6 committees. 2 are focused on the television nominations, both in the fiction and nonfiction, and then we have 4 that focus on the narrative, which is we have a narrative committee, an international doc, and a producers. And she really oversees that and puts those committees together. And part of the uniqueness of our committees is that our committees are confidential. So no one knows who are on the committee. So the committees can speak freely. They're not out there by studios are not hounding them about, what's coming up. So that part of it has really helped us kind of work our ways through some of these films because some of the films I'm sure if you looked at are obscure.
Hmm.
These committees work for about 5 or 6 months watching hundreds of films and looking and focusing on the 4, which is uniqueness of vision, original provocative subject matter, diversity both on camera and behind, and economy of means. And part of that is it's not the status quo. They're looking at some of these films from a different angle than maybe a lot of other shows might. And you can look at some of our nominations, because I'm looking at them, I'm like, I don't get it, but I'm gonna watch it and I end up loving it, and it's bringing some of that, especially that uniqueness of vision, an original provocative subject matter. There's a few on there that definitely fit those definitions.
Now, you've been the executive producer for the Film Independent Spirit Awards for a number of years, as we've talked about. How have you seen the festival and just generally the award circuit in general kind of evolve during your tenure? You've mentioned a couple of things, but how have things evolved?
Festivals are tricky. Again, I started in festivals again with the LA Film Festival. That was my love for many, many years. I loved everything about, working 2 weeks without any sleep and having that sort of excitement of all these filmmakers around. And I was sad to see when we had to let that go in 2018. But from that, I think even pre-pandemic, but specifically post-pandemic, we've seen a lot of the festivals, local festivals in Los Angeles start to sort of, I don't know, taper off.
Hmm.
We saw them come 10 days to 8 days to now, weekend only festivals. But that being said, it's still a great place for some of these films and a lot also on our television. A first place, this is the first and only place you may see some of these films or meet these filmmakers. Sundance is going, Sundance has some changes that they're looking at as well. But the festivals that we still use, because in order to be nominated for a Spirit Awards, outside of having being four-walled, screening in a traditional theater or streaming now, because that started with us in 2021 as well. If you don't get either of those, you have to be one of 6 film festivals, have played in those festivals to submit to the Spirit Awards. All that being said, we're still seeing great films and series come out of them. I just think from my personal view, I think there's fewer and fewer. We're seeing those every year.
Yeah,
But with that, we're also starting to see some great products come out of it.
yeah. This may be a difficult question to ask because, of course, I'm sure all these awards are like kids, right? They're all your favorite. But do you have
Totally.
a favorite moment or two from the years?
I do. I still kind of get starstruck every once in a while. There are people, right? There are people that you just don't think you'll ever meet or see. And um I know I keep going back to 2008 because Rainn
Mhm.
Wilson, I think that was one of the years and from the when I was producing and production managing prior to that, where he just came in, there was a strike, so he was available to us and he wanted to, and he gave it his all. And our opening sequence to that show, and you should look it up on YouTube. It's him and Dennis Hopper. And it's Dennis Hopper and him riding around Santa Monica. We shot it like, like a short film crew. There were 6 of us. I got an RV and parked it in a parking lot. We're like, here's what we're doing today, right? Obviously, with our directors, we had such creative directors and writers, but Dennis Hopper and Rainn Wilson were just amazing. So one of the best moments for me. It was also the same year as The Wrestler was nominated. So I mean, Rainn Wilson came out and just no holds bar.
Mhm.
Uh, I think also 2020, Aubrey Plaza, it was her 2nd year hosting, and she brought in the Gay Men's Choir and had this huge sing along, and it was all about Laura Dern, and to see Laura Dern's face from that, and it's one of those things that still kind of stick in your head that pops in every once in a while. So,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
when we have a writing team and a director and everyone that kind of really that comes together, and we have a host that's giving it her all or their all, then, it turns into magic.
Yeah, that's fun. Now, the Film Independent Spirit Awards usher in great contributions to the film industry. Of course, focusing a little bit on a Florida title here. Moonlight was directed by Florida State University alum Barry Jenkins and was among the accomplished works in the 2017 award show. What do you remember about Moonlight and that 2017 ceremony?
I remember let's talk about Barry first because Barry has been such a huge supporter of Film Independent as well.
Mhm.
He announced our nominees for us, and again, I believe it was in 2021 when we were still doing everything via Zoom
Mhm.
and had the best time, and I think it's that sort of understanding and having someone who just loves an organization and is willing to give. So Barry was great. I remember those kids. That's really what stands out, and seeing them there obviously Mahershala Ali, who's fantastic, but those kids were wonderful, and I remember them standing up on stage and accepting that award, and at one point, he pulled the mic down, and in my production head, I was like, "I think he just broke the mic, everyone." When you get to meet and even see and experience those in the room, it's a great moment. I mean, that was a beautiful film.
Yeah.
It was such a beautiful film, and I love seeing Florida represented, whether it be where it's shot or who's in it or who's directing it, who's writing it. There's a lot of great talent that come out of there.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, early on when that year, I guess it would have been 2016, it was the summertime, and I remember somebody on our board at the time saying, "There's this film that's going to Toronto, and it's called Moonlight," and we all heard it, and we were like, "Oh, great story, isn't that really nice?" A happy, happy, joy, joy, and then as that fall went on and the momentum kept building, and it was like, "Is this really gonna happen?" And it was an amazing time, that's for sure, and so many people associated with our organization are associated with Florida State University, and so there was that tie there, and a lot of people from Miami obviously knew Barry and a lot of the people that were involved in that, so it really was a statewide industry celebration for those couple of months that was going on. It was a great time for sure.
Yeah, and then, even from our show, I hated seeing what happened at the other award show, but it was so I loved that they got that recognition because
Mhm.
it was so well deserved, and it
Yeah,
was a beautiful film.
yeah,
We have
yeah.
the posters one in our walls, here at Film Independent still, so
Yeah. Now, the nominations are up for this year's Independent Spirit
yeah.
Awards. I know you can't play favorites or anything, but is
Yeah,
there a
yeah.
film or films that people should be paying attention to? And again, to make it clear, you are not at all involved in the selection, and you are not at all involved in any of who wins. So you can be a little bit of Switzerland here. I mean, is there anything we should be looking for?
You can't I think so, if you look, I'm looking at our nominees now, and there's some beautiful films, and there's some films that you really have to sit and think about, right? I would say if you haven't seen Nickel Boys, the way this film was shot is beautiful,
Okay.
and, definitely see all of the best feature. Let me put see all of our nominated films, but that is a beautiful film. I love The Substance. I mean, give me Demi Moore any day,
Sure.
when it comes to love seeing her on screen again. Some of these films, and especially, when you look at our Cassavetes Award, so that's what differentiates us from other award shows as well, right? So,
Right.
we have a budget cap. 30 million. And I know a lot of people are like, how is that independent? But when you look at films being made today, this change was made 2 years ago. It really those are independent films, right?
Mhm.
Because you have to look at what, opportunities and what is out there for filmmakers to use to make these films these days. Our John Cassavetes Award honors films that are made for less than 1,000,000.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have films that are submitted that are made for $5,000. Sean Baker years ago, it wasn't Cassavetes, but remember when he shot his film on his iPhone?
Yep.
This is where you get these really cool gritty filmmakers, and to watch Sean Baker come up through and work, and he's been a partner of Film Independent, a member of Film Independent, and now he's nominated for a Nora, which is also great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would also just throw in there some television too, because this has been part of the fun of including television these past few years. Obviously, Baby Reindeer has been out there, but there's some really cool television series. Phantasmas, by the way, was he's a creator, executive producer, is Julio Torres. He's also nominated in the film categories for best screenplay for Problemista. So he's all over the place. So it's cool to see a filmmaker who's nominated in two completely different genres in the
Yeah, that
same
is
year.
very cool. That is very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I mean, as we've talked about through here, you've touched a lot of different parts of the industry here through the years. What advice do you give aspiring producers or directors looking to kind of enter this area of production?
Wow. In the best way, say yes. I think I did that. I needed to understand what this industry was about, and it's always changing. It's ever evolving. I'm still learning. I always say that too to my team. I was like, as soon as I stop learning, then my career's over.
Hmm.
Go outside your comfort zone, and maybe again, I thought I was going to be in front of the camera, and I found my love and passion behind it. Right. So look for internships. That's literally where you'll start being guided towards something that just may be out of the blue and something you weren't expecting. So just be open and say yes.
So, Sean, you mentioned you were originally from Florida, and you also mentioned you love seeing the talent come out of here. And as we kind of always like to say, there's always a Florida tie. On a personal note, your brother was just elected to the Florida House of Representatives. Talk about your time in Florida, and now your brother being an elected official now.
My brother John is a great human being. I'm so proud of what he's accomplished. Prior to being elected to the House of Representatives, he was the mayor of the small town that next to where we grew up. So I grew up in Florida. I grew up in a very small town called Fort Meade, Florida. It's in central Polk County. I think maybe 5,000 people in one red light. And I loved that small town, but there was always something that I just wanted to try something different. And I moved from that small town to a little bit of a larger, probably the biggest city in Polk County in Lakeland, and then started making my way out west. And yeah, I told everyone in my family as well that I was going to come out here. I was going to give it a year. I was going to see if it worked for me. And I struggled the first year, but still there was something just keeping me here. I was like, I'm gonna try it another year. And I think it was about the 5th year where my family was like, "You're not coming home." And I was like, "I don't think so. I think I'm supposed to be here." But I love going home. My father, my entire family is there. So everyone that I love is still in Central Florida. So it's nice to go home. I was just there in April last year, and John and his wife, Anna, and my dad and my stepmom, we all went to the beach for a weekend, to kind of get out of that part of it as
Hmm.
well. So it's nice to spend when I do go home, we spend an immense amount of quality time for the little bit of time that I'm there. Going back to John, he's just, I'm super proud of him. I can't wait to see what he does.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've realized coming back here now, Polk County and Fort Meade aren't the small little places that they used to be. They're certainly booming these days.
They are. Fort Meade still only has 1 red light, so they haven't
Okay.
grown in that part, so traffic is a lot easier in Fort Meade when I go home, so
Little different than LA, right?
a little different than LA, absolutely.
So we've talked a lot about the Film Independent Spirit Awards. Let's make sure everybody knows where and when the awards ceremony is and how they can watch.
Absolutely. So here's my pitch. You can watch the 40th Film Independent Spirit Awards. You can watch on IMDb's YouTube page as well as Film Independent's YouTube page. The show airs live on Saturday, February 22nd at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern.
Well, Shawn, I really appreciate you spending time with us today to share more about the Film Independent Spirit Awards and all the things that you have been going on. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with everybody out there dealing with the fires. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and your preparation to be on the Film Florida podcast, and good luck with the upcoming show.
Thank you. Thank you. So nice to meet you and appreciate this opportunity as well.
Thanks for listening to the Film Florida podcast. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org and like or follow our social media pages. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. Please also consider going to our website and donating $20.25 for our 2025 fundraising campaign. Check out the Film Florida merchandise at filmflorida.creator-spring.com, and please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.